You say in your book that mind-controlled slaves were permitted any drug except marijuana. Why? It's an excellent question. The effects of marijuana on the brain are not conducive to mind control.
It doesn't mean you can't be traumatized and put under mind control. It just means it screws up the programming.
Because it actually opens neuron pathways in the brain. It expands thought. It is not conducive to mind control. They want it off the streets more than they want their drugs, like cocaine, off the street. Marijuana is especially targeted.
It cures cancer, you know, it does so many things.
More. It does so much, and that can't be repressed any further. The pharmaceutical companies want it repressed. The people that want control of the minds of the masses want it repressed. But that's old thinking. It's over.
Sure.
You know, people are reclaiming their strength of spirit and reclaiming their freedoms.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently, they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe or watch case. In this startling film, you will see dopesters lure children to destruction.
We're going over to Joe's place. Why don't you come along? We have a date to play a set of doubles. Oh, you can play anytime. Come on, we'll have some laughs. Can I go along with you? Sure. Hey, I'll see you at dinner, sis.
If you want a good smoke, try one of these.
You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will as he takes the first step toward enslavement.
Of course, if you're afraid.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide. And the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity. See this important film now, before it is too late.
Hey folks, and welcome to another video from aplaintruth.info. That was from a 1936 propaganda movie to get marijuana banned and illegalized in 1937. The movies came out across the country with Reefer Madness, and here you see a very seductive woman and a man and a woman going at it. Public Enemy #1. Men fear it, women desire it, or whatever. It's the devil's harvest. Here you see Henry J. Aniger, who said reefer makes the darkies think they're as good as white man. And then we have a book about the marijuana mob with a little hooker being busted with a John on the outside. And here we show the movie theaters. This was played all over the movie theaters to get it legalized, showing how bad it was. Protect the children, no children admitted. and then the world's worst women, and there you see a marijuana kind of hooker-looking girl over there. But in reality now, they're finding out that all of a sudden that marijuana is not only healing, but curing cancer. Here's from Dr. Courtney, who lives out here on the West Coast, who used hemp oil on a 6-month-old inoperable brain tumor child. Within 2 months had incredible success. The cancer's gone away. The child's still healthy. He's documented it with x-rays. He's a medical doctor, as we've had the cure for a long time. Not the disease, cure. Now you see the CBDs, all the different cures are coming out, what they've been able to do for so very long. I've personally had experience with people who have had stage 2 cancer, and they've gone to Johns Hopkins, and Johns Hopkins told them within 6 months they'd be dead if they didn't do another round of chemo. They instead went to hemp oil, spent 2 months, ate organic food, got out of wireless. They're still alive today, 3 years later, folks. Still alive. Hemp oil saved their life. But my point being is the new coming out now, it's not about making us, healing us. It's not about making it all better. The cancer industry has to make its money. It's been at this business, this war on cancer, for 25, 30 years, and it's a complete abject failure. A complete failure. Doctors rank 38th in the world in quality of health care in the United States, and #1 in cost. Obamacare's rates are going up, as I'll show you in a minute, again. And no one talks to the doctors like this. Here's a bunch of studies, folks, from the medical community, the National Institute of Health, the NCBI laboratories of national medicine. All these marijuana studies have been hidden from us and now being released about the efficacy and the healing properties and qualities of all marijuana, that it's curing. It's healing these diseases of cancer, dementia, Alzheimer's. It's topically treats for cuts and burns. It's a wonder weed, folks, and they've been hiding it from us since before the 1930s, when we'll get into a little bit about how they had hemp cars, and Henry Ford came out with alcohol, grain alcohol that could run on hemp oil. So this is going to be a link in my site here. You can check it all out about the healing properties of medical marijuana. Rick Simpson, big shout out to you for Simpson Oil. Thing's amazing. And now we're coming up with some cryogenic processes where you're not going to have the buzz, the THC, so it comes in powder form and even children can take it. And this is being done away from big medicine, away from big pharma, away from Monsanto, who just merged with Bayer Pharmaceuticals. It's the cure. It's the answer. And the medical industry will never, ever want to cure. You're not allowed to use the word cure when you're talking about this stuff. So here's my question, is why is the marijuana being approved around the world all at once? We see just in the past year or two, Colombia's approved it, Canada's approved it, Czech Republic, Uruguay, Spain, United States, Portugal, Netherlands, Switzerland, Romania. We see Mexico's approving it all in the same year, folks. And we're seeing Ireland approving marijuana all in the same year. Why is this going on? Well, this is why I think it's going on, is because I think because of the touchless torture program that I get into in my 3-hour video documentary, which I'll include in the show notes. We talk about how wireless communication, along with logarithmic supercomputers and D-wave computers, the geoengineering of the skies to create lower ionosphere so they can bounce signals off, and using the Gwen towers, the HARP towers, the radio towers for frequency control. We all have IP addresses, and we can all be controlled wirelessly with what Dr. Robert Duncan calls touchless torture or soul stealing. And one thing that's preventing them from a worldwide takeover of our minds is the cannabis. So here they're rolling it out. Steve Ackerman Capital, a very high-quality venture capitalist, has gone both feet in for the green gold rush, and they're estimating that the industry is going from 2016 in California alone from $4.5 billion to over $200 billion by 2020. They're predicting the market's going to grow. Why? Well, one is because cancer is supposed to be going through the roof. The World Health Organization says cancer is supposed to increase by 70% by 2030. That's only 15, 14 years from now, folks. Less than that. And they're saying cancer increasing by 70%. So here they'll come out with the medical marijuana, but there's something more nefarious going on. And this gets into the touchless torture, the wireless invasive species that they're able to do using Gwen towers, HARP, logarithmic computers and chemtrailing the skies to lower the ionosphere to bounce these signals off, because we all have IP addresses. We're all magnetic frequencies. And now that we've uploaded all the aluminum and all the toxicity, we're basically IP addresses with antennas that they can mind control, voice to the skull, or whatever they do. So all of these players are taking advantage of it, and my feeling is that they're doing this because they cannot control you when you're smoking marijuana, of regular marijuana, and they must change the frequency of the marijuana. And that's why they're legalizing it around the world. The distribution centers, like in California, it's Southern Wine and Spirits, the largest alcohol distributor, are now going to be the marijuana distributor. The czar from alcohol and tobacco went over to be the czar for medical marijuana. So they're going to take the marijuana. It's going to be origin from seed all the way to consumer. It's going to be tracked. You're going to have people on your property. All these regulations, these rules, Disabilities Act, fencing around the property, random inspections, fees, registrations, taxes. It's all coming to all the growers out in the Mendocino, Humboldt, tri-counties up in this area, and everybody's growing pot. At the same time, we have addictions that are going through the roof. We have alcohol spiking 49% as binge drinking goes, as they're trying to get rid of the middle class and people are suffering. Went into Costco in 2008 after the 2007 big drop-off. First thing they had was liquor there, so everybody could get lubed up and prime the pump. But alcoholism is getting worse, 1 in 8, and now they're going to turn everybody on to marijuana as well? Well, what's going on here? Do they want a bunch of addicts? Do they want a bunch more people doing drugs all of a sudden? No. They're trying to get people to get off the old medical marijuana, the good stuff, and get onto their synthetic Kmart cannabis. And here's an article about Trump proposing this week to further reduce funding for addiction treatment. The most damaging proposed cut is the president's 10-year plan to shrink spending on Medicaid, which provides coverage to an estimated 3 to 10 adults of opiate addiction. Some see the moves as painful betrayal of Americans whose families have been devastated by addiction and who trusted the president's repeated pledges to make them a priority once in office. Trump's budget priorities focus on tax cuts, military spending, bomb everybody. Also, a sidebar, George Poppy Bush, the reason he was named George Poppy Bush, as we see Obamacare going up another 12.5% due to the uncertainty. The reason he's called George Poppy Bush because he ran the opium fields for Cambodia and Laos. He was the CIA director. This is how they run. So drugs are a big part of the whole culture, along with pedophiliism, to keep the masses in line. But the rollout of medical marijuana, the synthetic marijuana being created by GW Pharmaceuticals, Monsanto's coming out with their own, they're going to have to go through the for-profit medical marijuana dispensaries now, whereas before they were non-profit. Now they're going to go through the distributors. So when they go through the distributors, they're going to go to a lab, they're going to be tweaked, and then they're going to be sold over the counter at these for-profit medical marijuana dispensaries that are going to be controlled by the FDA. And I feel very strongly that the reason they're doing this is because of what Kathy O'Brien was saying. They want to mind control everybody, and medical marijuana is keeping them from doing that. So grow your own, smoke them if you got them, but please don't give in to the system that's going to take away all of the advantages of the medical marijuana that the artisans are growing out here. And also, the fact is, it's still federally illegal, and everybody in California is going nuts. They're building 150,000 square foot indoor grow facilities everywhere, and they're taking apart the lands up where I live. The neighbors are putting in just these massive, massive greenhouses and leveling the land with these big graders and destroying the earth. And here we can see that cancer is due to rise, and here's all the statistics on cancer you can read about. I'll put those in the show notes. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. Hopefully this helps out, and let's get into the next segment. So everyone's getting all hyped up on this 5G that's going to cause mass radiation. California is due to install 50,000 more 5G towers all across the state. Again, I think this is my feeling, and my research is telling me, and my gut's telling me, that this is all about using frequency control. We're frequency beings. We operate at a certain hertz, just very close to Earth's resonance, magnetic resonance frequency, as well as the ionosphere. Putting rubber soles on our shoes disconnected us from Earth's frequency. and their battery. We disconnected from the battery. This was celebrated by the Tavistock Institute in the movie Rolling Stones. So these 5Gs are going to be much more ability to use higher frequency, more frequencies in the frequency bands, and much more acute control, and control many, many more through these operations of the 5G. It's not only unhealthy for the Wi-Fi radiation in itself, but it's also about mass control of the population in toto. I think this is their plan. But let's get back into the history. How did this all begin? How did hemp oil become the bad guy and the evil weed and loco weed and all the rest of that? How did we get started with the starting with the robber barons way back in the 1900s, who are still in power today? The same foundations, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, etc., still rule along with the Gates Foundations. So let's take a look. So let's go back in time to the creation of the industrial devolution with Henry Ford, Rockefeller Oil, and whatnot. And at the very beginning, when the automakers came out, they wanted to get rid of all public transportation. But originally Ford and Diesel, Henry Ford, they came out with hemp cars. They made the cars of hemp. They ran on hemp. It was amazing. And they wanted all their vehicles to be run on hemp oil. The whole idea Henry Ford had was that he had a switch in his Model A and Model T cars where it could run on alcohol, grain alcohol. And his dream was that all the farmers across the country, of which 40% more were farmers in the early 1900s, they could just stop at the farms, make the grain alcohol, and the farmers would get the business. And they could get to know the farmers, and they could borrow the farmers' food as well. And anybody could travel cross country, and they could trade and they barter. That was their dream until the Rothschilds and General Motors and Firestone and Sears Roebuck all got in the game and said, no, we're going to rip up those cars. And we're going to rip up those electric trains. We're not going to allow hemp oil to be brought across. It's going to be gasoline or nothing, and we'll make sure. So what they did is they created the United Cities Motors Transit, and they created a corporation with General Motors in charge and Firestone, and they went around the entire country. They went to New Jersey, they went to Philadelphia, they went all over, and they started ripping up all the rail cars across the country, as you can see from this beginning in this video right here.
When you talk about public transportation in America, for the first part of the century, you're talking about streetcars. Trolleys ran on most major avenues every few minutes. Steel track and quiet electric motors made the ride smooth and clean and comfortable. The center of the road was reserved for streetcars, and the new automobiles had to move out of the way.
In 1922, only 1 American in 10 owned an automobile. Everyone except for the 1 in 10 who owned an automobile used rail. At that time, Alfred P. Sloan said, wait a minute, this is a great opportunity. I mean, we've got 90% of the market out there that we can somehow turn into automobile users. If we can eliminate the rail alternatives, we will create a new market for our cars. They had to get rid of the streetcars. They wanted the space that the streetcars used for automobiles.
By a vote of 215 to 190, the House today rejected a proposal that would allow cities to spend their share of the Highway Trust Fund on buses, subways, and trains instead of on highways.
The House, defying reason, voted to block funds for mass transit, which we all need, and pour billions more into highways that only the highway lobby wants.
So let's get into the little history of hemp and how hemp was used originally in the first cars to drive by Henry Ford. His first car was itself constructed from hemp, and he was designing his cars. They had an alcohol switch, a grain alcohol switch, and a fossil fuel gasoline switch on his Model Ts you could choose between. His dream was that you could drive cross country, go to the farmers, they could make some grain alcohol through hemp oil or some other potatoes or whatever, and you could drive literally across the country, stopping at farm to farm, buy their farm food, the farmers would be enriched. Back in the early 1900s, 40 to 45% of the entire country was based on growing food. Now it's less than 1%. Also, Rudolf Diesel, the inventor of the diesel engine, designed his to run on vegetable and seed oil like hemp. He actually ran the thing on peanut oil for the 1900 World's Fair. Little facts about hemp: it produces up to 4 times more cellulose per acre than trees and grows a little quicker than the forest. Unlike gasoline, when we run out of soil, unless we run out of soil, hemp is renewable. Hemp fuel does not contribute to sulfur dioxide, air poisoning, CO2, global warming, okay? It also does not spill into the Gulf of Mexico. It also doesn't spill off Alaska. It also doesn't have to have fracking and have all the poisonous activities of the fracking and whatnot. And growing hemp for fuel would be a tremendous boon for the American farmers and the agricultural industry. So this is the story about how this all came to be. Henry Ford told a reporter that ethyl alcohol was the fuel of the future in 1925. The fuel of the future is going to come from fruit like sumac out of the road, or from apples, weeds, sawdust, almost anything. There is fuel in every bit of vegetable matter that can be fermented. There's enough alcohol in 1 year's yield of an acre of potatoes to drive the machinery necessary to cultivate the fields for 100 years. So how did they get rid of hemp? Well, this is the old conspiracy with the automakers. They've been at it for a long time. This article starts off going into the past 18 months, where Volkswagen scandal, where they were changing the smog so the devices didn't have as much smog coming out to get better fuel efficiency. And then there was a big smog conspiracy back in 1968 with the Department of Justice and the Big Three, when they were alleged by the Department of Justice alleged that they were hiding, not wanting to put smog controls, catalytic converters in their cars. But this I want to get back to 1922 with Alfred Sloan, the head of General Motors. He created a working group charged with undermining and replacing the electric trolley. The group's first act was to launch a bus line that arrived a minute before the streetcar and followed the same exact routes. The trolley line would soon shut down. At the same time, there were hundreds of trolley lines in Los Angeles, but it was a harbinger of things to come. In the early 1920s, the streetcar industry was booming. There were 1,200 tramway and interurban train companies with 29,000 miles in track. In the best years, they topped 15 billion riders. Over 1,000 miles of trolley track crisscrossed Los Angeles area alone, carrying people to work. It dominated the transit scene, but competition was gaining strength. The number of cars on the roads reached 20 million in the 1920s. The pressure from the automobile industry, the trolley remained a major form of urban transportation. So GM was intent on eliminating the competition. They pressured the banks and small communities to starve local trolley companies of finance, and they made credit available to streetcar companies to replace their tracks with GM buses. 10 years later, in 1932, GM established United Cities Motor Transportation to buy electrical streetcar companies in urban areas and convert them into bus operations. After purchasing the streetcar systems, the UCMT ripped up the tracks and tore down the overhead wires. Once the conversion was complete, they resold the new bus systems on condition they were not reconverted to streetcars. In fact, the owners had to sign a contract with UMCT. In relative obscurity in Galesburg, Illinois, UCMT made its first urban takeover in 1933. Moving swiftly, it had already dismantled trolley systems in 3 urban centers before being censured by the American Transit Association. In 1935, GM dissolved UCMT. However, not long before its anti-trolley activities were revived and redoubled. GM and its co-conspirators developed a network of front organizations. In 1936, it joined with Greyhound to form National City Lines. In 1938, they collaborated with Standard Oil of California to create Pacific City Lines. In 1939, Phillips Petroleum and Mack Truck joins National City Lines. American City Lines was created in 1943 to focus on the biggest cities. In 1935, the Public Utility Holding Act made it extremely difficult for energy companies to own trolley lines. They were providing the energy for the streetcars. Companies that had previously refused GM's advances began to sell. 18 months later, GM scooped up 90 miles of tramway in Manhattan. After successfully converting New York's trolley system, GM and his cronies moved to Tulsa, Philadelphia, Montgomery, Cedar Rapids, El Paso, Baltimore, Chicago, and L.A. When all was said and done, 100 electrical transit systems in 45 cities were ripped up, converted, and resold. By the 1950s, nearly 90% of the U.S. electrical streetcar structure was gone. This is how they roll, folks. They do it over time. So California, not only is it the only state in the United States that mandatorily requires vaccinations of children or they cannot go to school, and there was such little protest by people in California when they rammed this through, when Dr. Pan, the name for the Baphomet devil, who was supposedly a pediatrician in the Senate, rammed it through Congress to make it law that you don't have a choice to care for your child anymore. So now they supposed alleged, oh, great for everybody, weed is coming to California, and major effort put on by the government. Why are they driving this home through? Well, last year they passed 4 laws. One was for cultivation, one was for distribution, one was for testing, and one is for the for-profit now medical dispensaries. And also we need to understand that the new laws, it's going to be an open container law if you're caught even with a pipe in your car, just like open the container. Oh, they're going to do saliva tests on some authorities using to determine marijuana impairment. Now, what are they using saliva tests for? 23andMe, the human genome. See another way to collect data. Police agencies, several cities are testing a mouse swab device that can determine whether drivers are stoned. 50% of medical cannabis sold in California reaches consumers via home delivery. We're going to be at our homes a lot more, so they're going to deliver it to us because we need to get our fix and be at home. So the AB 277 law, there were 4 of them, as I said, bills that went through the state last November, and it spells out nifty licensing schemes and how distributors will be the gatekeepers between cultivators, manufacturers, and dispensaries. Additionally, they'll provide an internet information regarding the status of every license issued by that entity. They're going to know everything about you, an internet database, also a P.O. box, that public record, and provide a physical location to the licensing authority. So your grow is going to be completely online. Everybody's going to know about it. They're tracking it from seed all the way through to dispensary to user. Now, what I believe they're doing is they're going to be injecting it with one of their frequency suppression devices, and this is why the testimony by Kathy O'Brien that I just laid out makes sense, is because the higher frequency vibration from smoking marijuana or ingesting it causes us into an altered state, and that altered state of higher frequency consciousness cannot be controlled by the big touchless torture Wi-Fi machines that are wanting to be used on all of us for maximum control of everyone. So what I want to bring up to this point is, this is another article from just a few days ago, surprise massive weed shortage in Nevada. Now, Nevada had been the most anti-dope place you could possibly go to. Just one spleef will get you thrown in jail. And by the way, it's still federally illegal. Still federally illegal that they can come in any time and crack a felony on anybody with marijuana with just one spleef. Okay? So now everybody's rushing to do this, but it's still federally illegal. No one's bringing that up, folks. So they can clamp down on anyone at any time. So here up in Nevada, they're saying they can't get their marijuana to them for the dispensaries because the distributors won't distribute it. They've been having a shortage that has been come up because of the distributors that have the licenses will not distribute the marijuana. Okay? And the reason they won't do that is because I think they're altering it in order to make it a lower frequency so they can mind control us. And that's what I think is going on throughout the entire legislation and legalization of marijuana around the world. By keeping us in a lower frequency but still giving us that buzz, the wireless technology for touchless torture that is a Skynet operation using loon balloons and the cell phone towers and HARP and all their logarithmic computers and their smart dust being sprayed that we're ingesting, and our read-write technology that goes in our bodies where they can get inside our heads and do things to our bodies, as I chronicled in the last couple of videos. It's all being done by us smoking this now synthetic Kmart cannabis corporate weed that must go through a public FDA approval process before they can come to the medical dispensaries, before they can get it to people. This is how I believe and think they're doing the ultimate control, and why marijuana is being legalized today all over the world, and where it used to be the reefer madness, it'll kill people and drive people crazy, is now seen as good and helpful and willing to come to the marketplace all at once. Brought to you by the big pharmacology companies from hell like Monsanto, who just merged with Bayer Pharmaceuticals, and all the rest of these guys that have no interest in our well-being. Keep us sick, keep us ill. That's the way they profit the most. But most of all, keep us controlled, as Big Brother wants to do. So smoke them if you got them and grow your own is the answer to this. And support your local medical marijuana that is not participating. And if you don't participate, they're passing draconian laws that if you do not register with your county and pay the exorbitant taxes associated with it, if you don't register with the state and get licensed and fill out all these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages they're requiring to, including the first page, which says any member of the DEA, any member of the organizations in the county that they deem necessary can come onto your property at any time. Plus, they're making you have to put up fences and all, and disability parking and all the rest of this nonsense. Just what you used to do for free. I mean, it's going to be crazy. They're charging $500 a day fines if you do not comply per plant, per day. So if you have 100 plants and they decide not to tell you that they fined you for a week, you can end up owing hundreds of thousands of dollars on your property and not even know it. Right now, they're going around to property owners and they're giving them a 3-day cease and desist in Mendocino County. And they have 3 days to pull up their plants if they haven't registered, which most of them have not because they don't trust the government, or they're going to come in and charge you $500 a day and shut you down. Up in Shasta County in that area, they're pouring cement into your wells after they take out your crops. This is how bad the corporations are taking over the medical marijuana industry. Don't let them, folks. Grow your own. All right, this is the Plain Truth Out. We'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for listening. Peace out.